So, for the past 2 weeks, I've been working with two poets on poetry projects that they are interested in, and I just kind of wanted to talk through that whole process, things we've learned, things to be thinking about that maybe. So, if you have your own kind of poetry project you're thinking about doing, maybe some things you want to be considering yourself. Good morning, guys. Good evening, afternoon. Welcome to Versus Podcast on art, business, poetry, arts and offers. My name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Having a pretty good morning, man.
Okay.
It's pretty productive. How about you, man?
Likewise, busy, but good busy. One of the things that you're a part of that I just kicked off, so I'm writing a book, mini essays, taking quotes from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations and then kind of applying it to poetry. So I just sent the first essay to a group I've created, so it's a challenge group. So the goal is, it's not really like editing as much as it's kind of like thinking through ideas and just kind of like seeing like what resonates, what hits, what causes us to think more, and things like that, and things that kind of get the greatest response versus what maybe could help it achieve a greater impact. Yeah. Which in this idea of just a challenge group, I think is really helpful, because I think a lot of times when we're looking for feedback, we can miss some of the conceptual in favor of the more minute aspects of like, you know, like the figurative language or the image or like even like the grammar or like what it looks like visually on the page versus actually looking at the ideas and examining the ideas.
Yeah.
You know, so
I think I even think about it like almost like, you know, when you do like focus groups for different things. I mean, even if you have like like if you have like a local politician or something like that, or like they want to run some ads for their like politician, then you kind of bring in some people from all walks of life to kind of like take a look at what they're putting out. Right. And the cool thing that, you know, probably like that should happen in that space is, because these are people from all walks of life, like, you know, if you're the creator of it or you're the politician or you're somebody in the making of it, like maybe you have like this kind of specific focus and maybe you miss something that would have been a huge, you know, indicator of like something on someone else's end. So I think like this kind of group kind of in a way kind of does the same thing, where you have, you know, just other people, like other writers or just like kind of people in the field, and we're able to kind of take a look at, you know, the selections that you're putting in there. And I think, you know, for myself, it's like it might be not worse. Worse is wrong. But it's like my feedback hopefully is helpful, but it's like also it's like there's degrees of other people's feedback that are going to be like, okay, well, I'm from, you know, this walk of life from over here, and like I'm trying to do something with my writing, I'm trying to do something with my poetry, and reading this work does something different than it maybe does for Matthias or this person or this person. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a really cool way to kind of test drive some ideas. And I also think, I mean, more writers should kind of have a feedback chamber that is more diverse and kind of a little bit more open to discussion.
Yeah, because not everyone in the group, it's two poets and then one member who just reads all the time, you know, writes a little bit, but isn't as much of in the poet field, but still, again, kind of in the literary space to a degree. Yeah. I think is really helpful. And I don't even think it has to necessarily be, I mean, I think it would be great for all forms of art, you know, to kind of have, you know, if you're a painter, if you're a musician, you know, having a group that meets to, again, I wouldn't even just view it as like a feedback as much as like a discussion group to kind of see, you know, again, conceptually, what are you doing? But it can be for other walks of life too, like if you're starting a business, a group to kind of talk about that. It could be parenting. It could be really any sort of group you want, but just having that group of people where it's like, hey, we're gonna like critically look at this, and it's not all gonna be positive.
Yeah.
In the sense of like praise, you know, and that can certainly be a part of it, but everything's open to questioning, I think.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and I think it's funny that you bring that up when it talks about like praise in those spaces, because I also think that because we're in community, and what is that, Lauryn Hill? Like, I'm sensitive about my ish. So it's like, a lot of people don't really kind of open themselves up for that kind of discussion, right? Because they're like, well, if I open myself up for that kind of discussion, then what if the reception is not?
Yeah, well, it's not positive.
What if it's not great? And a lot of times, like, that's also why you see people kind of put themselves solely in situations where it's like you're gonna get praise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the thing that's harmful to that, is that if you want to put yourself like in the actual market later on, maybe you're selling a book, maybe you're selling like a class, maybe you're doing performances and things like that, because now you're putting yourself in a position where it's like the stranger has to maybe rate whether or not they're gonna like support you, or not even necessarily support themselves by purchasing something that you're offering. So once you start closing yourself off to that kind of discussion around your work or what your product is, you start closing yourself off from the potential to kind of reach the everyday other person.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we had a micro mic reading here last night. We had Steve Abbott and Celia Ayers, who both. It was really good. Yeah. And I'm excited to post the discussion. The discussion we had is we talk a lot about mentorship, since both of them have experience of taking on mentors. Celia right now has a cohort working towards a manuscript, and I've also been able to work with some of the poets in that who are getting some work done too, and like everyone's had such great things to say. But one of the things that's come up a lot is that a lot of times when people are asking for feedback, they're not really asking for feedback, they're really asking for validation. Like, is what I'm doing worth it? Can other people get value from what I'm offering? And so I think if you're someone that likes this idea of a challenge group, I think you also need to be at a position where you're comfortable with, like, you have to have confidence in your own level of work already. Like, you're already, there's already the assumption that what you're doing can stand on its own, and you're just furthering that. But if you have doubts that it can even work on its own, then I don't know if necessarily a challenge group is going to work out, because a challenge group has to last, and if your thing can't stand on its own, then it's not going to last.
So can you describe kind of what that feeling is, or what elements kind of put themselves together so that like, okay, well, now I'm ready for kind of this challenge kind of discussion space around my work?
Yeah. So I think I think firstly what I would say is that I wouldn't necessarily do it if I'm completely new in a field and like I've never done anything in the field, like in this case, like I've never written, like, not that this collection is poems, but like I've never really written before. I don't know if I would make a challenge group around writing. I might instead seek more like mentorship first, right? And develop it in the field first. But I think another component too is having confidence in yourself. And I think one way you can kind of detect if you have confidence or not is if you're overly defensive. Like if someone offers you an honest critique that is valuable. And I really can't stress those qualifiers enough, because not every critique you receive is going to be valuable. But if someone is offering you valuable critique and your first inclination is to defend yourself, I don't know if you're ready for a challenge group.
Yeah, and I think...
I'm not trying to light bell at you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's like something that's an interesting kind of note, because I think that also happens really just generally when we're talking about workshops or anything like that. A lot of people go into workshops thinking that the workshop is, I mean, even if they're expecting some kind of feedback, or like negative or positive, but in this case kind of negative, then they're thinking that their positioning on that should be defending what I've written until I can't defend it anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, I mean, to be clear, I absolutely have been that exact poet at times, where I'm like, I go into a space, I'm like, I want to share my work, but because when I was, because at the time that I was writing, it happens a lot of times, like you're writing it and you're like, oh my gosh, this blew my mind, like when I was writing it. And because that's how it functioned for you, you're thinking like, no, everybody's going to be blown away. So blown away that they're not going to have any kind of critiques or anything. And so you bring it into that space. I'll never forget. So we were we did this workshop, and it was at Writing Wrongs, actually. And it was like, it wasn't after, I think it was like a thing that they did like before the show. But I had written, like, we had this like workshop where we wrote first, and then everybody shared. And this is like when I'm like really young, like a much younger poet. Well, it was much younger in my poetry journey, right? So, where I'm at in my poetry journey. And so I wrote this poem, and I'm thinking to myself, like, holy crap, I just like broke the code. And so I can't remember who it was that we were talking, like I was talking about, like an aspect of my poems that it actually might have been Will. And I don't know if he was actually doing the workshop as much as I think he was, like, he had came in because he was like hosting the show, but he had said something about my poem that I was like, no, no way, you just don't understand. And then like I'm like, I think in that space I was very defensive over my work, and part of it is because I wasn't as familiar with who Will Evans is, right? Because now it's like, if like whether it be my work or the fact that it's Will Evans, I can concede on both and be like, okay, like that's Will Evans. But then I'm just thinking, like, the only thing I'm thinking about is, man, they're trying to get me to change me. Like, this is my work. You're trying to get me to change me. And then thinking back, just like, and I was like really defensive about it. And so I took it, like, after naturally the open mic was afterwards, and then I took it home. And back then, this was a time when I would literally go to like 4 different open mics like a week. So back then, like I would go to Writing Wrongs. Whenever Steve's like show that was on that Monday, I would go to Steve Abbott's show too.
Oh, the Forum.
The Forum. And then I would go to Writing Wrongs, and then I would go to Writer's Block. Then I would go to the dance, and then sometimes there's like different shows that might happen on Fridays, and I would go to those too. So I took it home, and mind you, I had like a 9 to 5. So like literally, I took it home, was looking at this poem forever, and I can't even remember, like, because I don't think I use the poem anymore. But I was looking at this poem forever, like, nah, what is wrong? Like, of course he's wrong. I slept on it and I woke up the next morning, and I'm like, I'm going to work, and I'm at work. Very bad employee, by the way. I have the poem like on my desk. I'm sitting myself like,
lead sales, but horrible.
Right. But I'm like, I'm looking at him like, this is like, no, like this is how this poem should function. And then the second that I was just like, let me just try it the way that he said. The second I did that, I was like, I'm an idiot. But it was like, it all kind of made sense. And so, which is all just to say that, and like, I think by Wednesday, the show, like by that night, the show, Writer's Block, I tried that poem, and I was just like, oh, it even felt better in performing it. And so like, there's like a lot of like those type of things that you just have to be, I think, open to, like, as opposed to fighting for the poem, or I guess you take out what fighting for the poem actually means. Because a lot of times it means, for poets, it means fighting for this exact version of the poem, the one that came out of your brain and onto the piece of paper that day. And I'm like, fighting for the poem should mean like, okay, like if there is a new idea, does this new idea make the poem stronger? Like, try it, give it like some energy before you kind of summarily dismiss it, which is, again, another way of, if you're confident in your work, if you're confident in who you are as an artist or as a person or as a writer or anything like that, then it allows you that space to be like, well, if there is other ideas, it doesn't break my ego, it doesn't hurt like, who I am as a person to try new things or to try to incorporate new things. And so like, a group like this where it's like, if there's positive or negative feedback, neither of those means that like, oh, this is like, a terrible direction to go down. Yeah. Which is not going to be the case if you like, if you've never written a poem before and you're like, hey, I just want to give this is this group for all the people that want to judge my brand new poetry. Yeah.
So I think it's great you mentioned. Well, I think also having in your group people whose opinions, you can trust them to be objective, is really helpful. Will was actually in when I was at Cal. He was in my cohort. And
Shout out Will.
Yeah, no, he's a super smart guy too. My God.
He's the reason why I went bald and grew a beard.
Will Evans does not have hair. The earring is next, I guess, huh? Is that...
Actually, they said I did. I was like, I'm not Jordan
yet. I want to actually touch on that sense of objectivity really quick too. So I think because that's another key component, and I think it's somewhat related to confidence, but I think also just the degree with just artists as well as you have to be able to separate your work from you. Like, my poem is not me. My book is not me. I wrote it, but it's like when people are making comments on what I produced, they're making comments on what I produced. They're not making comments on me. And if you're not able to create that separation, you're probably not ready for a challenge group. Because every time that they're going to raise something, you're going to think that they're attacking you. And it has nothing to do with you at all. We're really attached to the things that we create. And almost to an unhealthy level. So it's if you struggle with that sort of separation, I wouldn't recommend a challenge group.
Yeah. So do you feel like there is like what is the kind of healthy level? Because I think I would say, like, as an artist, you should be in a way attached to the things you create. You know what I mean? Like, there should be I would even say even like a degree of pride like around it. Like, like there are people that are creating nothing, right? There are people that they're like, I would love, we see it all the time at like open mics and stuff like that, where it's like there's somebody that's like, they'll come to the open mic, but like, I love poetry. I would love to write poems. I think I'm a poet at heart. Never wrote a poem, or I don't think I'll ever finish this poem that I've been writing for a year and a half or something of that nature. And everybody on their own time and in their own time, but you should. I think there should be like a degree or a level of pride for people that are creating things, and definitely like, and if you're like putting it out in the world, like that too. So what do you feel like is like kind of the healthy level of like pride, kind of the different that shooting that gap between like that pride and detachment for an artist?
So we're not saying I don't have pride in what I create. It's a whole different argument. I can be very proud of the things that I make. I'm not gonna let comments about what I've created determine my own self-worth. The 1-star review on Amazon is not talking about me as an author. Conversely, no
matter what that comment said.
But it's also true because it works both ways.
Yeah.
It's about the critique and it's also about the praise.
Yeah.
The 5-star review is not making a comment about me. It's making a comment about the work. The review in the newspaper is not talking about me. It's talking about the work. I can still be proud of the work. I can still be connected to the work because it's like I was the one that made it.
Yeah.
But I think what I also have to understand is if I'm presenting work to the world, I also lose some ownership of it. People are going to do what they will with it that I have no control over.
Yeah.
From a standpoint that a lot of artists are worried about, like AI, for instance. Talking with one of our poets recently from a recording who really didn't want to have themselves recorded because they're like, hey, if I have myself recorded, this is going to be used to train AI and like to do things potentially that I have no control over.
Yeah.
And that's our self, our person, our visual representation in the real world, so we don't even necessarily have complete control over that. So that's the thing where it's like if I create something and then someone makes a comment of it and I ruminate on that comment for days, that's a sign that I think we have an unhealthy relationship with what we've created. Yeah. And conversely, if we create something and then people give us the praise and then we're like, oh, look at me, I'm I'm on top of the world. Well, I would want that for us, for how we view ourselves anyways. I wouldn't want it to be reliant on external validation.
Yeah. I think there's an anticipation when you create anything for there to be this warm, ecstatic welcome from the world that's around you. And I even think as poets are kind of conditioned that way, in a good way, I would say, because I think like stuff like open mics, like that's good, right? It's good that, and I also don't think that open mics, like the only function of an open mic would be, naturally, if you're like, oh, I want to start putting books and stuff like that. Like a lot of that is just for like self-expression and to getting things out. And there's people, we used to do 7th Draft Poetry open mic over at $2 Radio headquarters over there on Parsons, and it was so funny because it's like about 50% of the poets that would come are people that they're working on projects, or they're working on like just building up their own catalog of poetry and kind of building towards whatever other piece of work that they're building towards. But the other half were people that they had never thought about getting on an open mic before, but because they're kind of in the area, or and they've seen the sign, or they've heard one of us do poems and they want to come check it out, they're like, yeah, I don't know, I kind of wrote this poem kind of randomly and I wanted to get on the open mic and express myself. And I think that, again, for those people, when they're expressing, the thing that they get back from the room is claps or snaps and stuff like that, and that's good. And I think there's like a lot of times there's this conditioning of, and you can actually kind of see it sometimes, like in how people think about themselves, like either online or something like that, where they're like, man, I gotta rewind so I know this poem is great, and like they're riding that wave. And I want to be clear, I at points was exactly that person, right? And so like I'm not excluding myself from this. I'm just saying that like, even there's points where I'm like, yeah, this poem is great because this happened while I'm performing this poem, or this happened when I wrote the poem and somebody read it or something like that. But yeah, like there should be kind of like, I hear what you're saying, like that detachment from like, whether it's actually, I think it's so much easier to obsess over the negativity, and I mean like truly obsess over it, right? Like exactly what you said, like going back to that comment, like if you put up a YouTube video of a poem and then like somebody makes a comment and then you're like, let me click on the on who this person is. Let me go to their Facebook. Let me see what like. That can like send you into a spiral. So yeah, there has to be a little bit of an attachment to be like, okay, this is what this person. Even if they get personal, it's only personal to them, right? Like, okay, maybe it's personal for them, but if it's personal for you, then yeah, like it's anything that you put out into the world is going to get mixed reception.
Yeah. Which is why when you're choosing people, if you're interested in a challenge group, you gotta pick people that have your best interest in mind. Because like internet strangers, you know nothing about them, and this is the danger of the I mean, everyone will talk about this, even people that are very much aware of it. It's like, you'll have 1,000 comments and one negative comment, 1,000 happy positive comments and one negative comment, and we're just evolutionary, just trained to home in on that and focus on it. And these are people that we have no connection with. It's almost 100% of cases a parasocial relationship where we have no idea who is on the other side of the screen. Yeah. And so why would we care about them? So picking people that have your best interest in mind, because it also changes the impact.
100%.
Anyways, if you guys have other questions about challenge groups, this is the first time I've ever done this, so I'll keep you guys posted on how it goes and things. But you can let us know, or if you've done a challenge group yourself, be sure to keep me posted. I did want to spend kind of our second half talking about another project that we've been working on, or I've been working on. So the last 2 weeks, today is the final day. I've been working with 2 poets on a poetry project every day for about 30 minutes a day. So basically what we'll do, we meet online for 30 minutes, talk about their projects, try to move them in a direction. And talking to the poets, the things that they focused on the most where they're like, hey, I want to do a chapbook. Both of them want to do a chapbook. One poet is working entirely just on kind of a traditional chapbook, talking about faith stuff and neurodivergence. And the other poet talking about the death of her father, and also interested in trying to incorporate some mixed media, like some art and things like that into the collection too. And so I just kind of want to talk about some things that have come up with that. What's up to Gansham hanging out with us? So just some realizations I've had, and this is somewhat spur of the moment, so we can kind of like talk through things. If you have questions, let me know.
Yeah.
The first thing I've noticed just from working with them and also in talking with other poets is I think a lot of us are making art and making poems or whatever, whatever the discipline may be, without really having an idea of where this is going. I'm making these poems. What am I going to do with these poems? I'm making this art. What am I going to do with this art? And I don't think that we have to have a goal. I think that just the act of creation in and of itself is enough. But I also think it's okay to be like, you know what? I want to have a little bit more intentionality with what I'm creating. I think you see that a lot with a lot of your larger name poets, the ones who are winning like awards like Kingsley Tuft or like Pulitzers and things like that.
Yeah.
They're not just writing poems to write poems. They're writing poems with an aim in mind. Like, this is going to be a book. This is a book that I'm going to be submitting to contests. And not like, like your $20 contests, like, and win $1,000 and like 20 copies. No, they're submitting to like the top of the top awards. There's some intentionality. So that means that, every poem that I write in this collection needs to be on this theme, or it needs to incorporate this element, maybe like a word or an image.
Yeah.
And so I think the very first thing I've learned is a lot of poets don't have necessarily that level of intentionality with their work, and that may be beneficial for some, not for all poets, but for some poets and artists to be considering.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm working on that kind of made, and actually because I was like, I was in production yesterday. I'm kind of interviewing somebody that like they do like clothes design and stuff like that. But in doing that, this was kind of their first time ever really talking about exactly who they are, what they do, and the purpose behind what they're doing. And then after like we did the interview and like production is packed up, like I'm on my way actually to another shoot. And as I'm on my way to another shoot, like they messaged me and they're like, doing this interview gave me so many ideas, because now that I've clearly expressed kind of like what I do and kind of what I'm doing, it helped me kind of give language to and actually kind of map some things out that I've been kind of like lost on, like what do I do with this piece, or what do I do with this piece? And I think that like that kind of sensibility, that kind of like frame of mind can really help poets, because like this person isn't a poet, but it can help poets, because again, if you have this aspiration of, I want books out in the world, I want this thing out in the world, I want to be able to create and sustain myself, kind of picking up that kind of dynamic where you're like, well, hold on, what am I doing exactly? Like, if I'm sitting down to write a poem, I'm not in kind of like, the freedom that comes from form, right? Like this idea that I'm not just writing about anything. I'm writing, this is the kind of writer that I am, at least right now. Like, it doesn't have to stay like this. It doesn't have to be like this forever. But let's say right now in April, like maybe April, May, June, and July of 2025, I am this kind of poet. I'm the poet that says this, that talks about this, that has this kind of sensibility, that has this kind of framework, and I push whatever when I'm sitting down to write, when I'm sitting down to create, even when you're sitting down to design. So like maybe you're a poet and so like there's other things that you're doing, but you're also doing these things with this kind of framework in mind. It can help. So yeah, exactly what you're saying. Like this idea that if you know what you're doing and like the kind of work that you're trying to produce when you're sitting down to produce, I think it gives you like a really sharp measure of freedom and a really kind of almost like powerful beam of freedom, like in order to create. Permission to use an analogy.
The last one was a little iffy, but we'll see how this one goes. All right.
Okay. So there's this show, Naruto, right? I'm a huge fan of Naruto. I have like some poems about Naruto. And in Naruto, it's like everybody, well, not everybody, but like all of the ninjas and like people, there's like some people that, they have like a chakra network. So they have like chakra, right? And the main character of the show, I'm going to use the main character. But the main character of the show, he just has like this huge amount of chakra inside of him. I'm not going to spoil it, but like he just has this huge amount of chakra inside of him. But throughout the show, it's like he's not the best ninja. You know what I mean? There's ninjas, there's people that can beat him, and there's people that are faster than him, that are smarter than him, all these kind of things. But once he has chakra, because kind of the whole story, or a lot of the part of the story is about him learning how to use the chakra, right? And how to kind of use that power. And once he has control of like his chakra flow and he has chakra control, he can create things that are really powerful weapons for him to kind of use in certain battles, right? And I think about that when again, kind of what we're talking about here, where it's like, yeah, you have all these ideas and you can have all these ideas kind of flowing inside of you. You can feel like you're like the most amazing poet ever, but if you haven't created something that is concentrated, controlled avenue, then it's going to be really hard for you to kind of put that out in the world, because it's like, yeah, I just see like this power bubbling over, but like where is it going?
Yeah.
And so yeah, shout out to the Rasengan, but that's different. But yeah, just to say that, yeah, once you have kind of control and a direction and a velocity for that energy, I mean, you can create almost anything.
This kind of ties into one of the second things I mentioned. So, like I mentioned, they wanted to create a book, the two poets I've been working with. So, one of the things is it's never just about the book. It's why do you want to create a book? Because what is the book going to do? One of the things we talk about a lot on the channel is that, the book isn't the last step. The book is the first step. So once you have the book, what else can we do? One of the things that we discussed was, for instance, hosting events and things like that. So organizing, for instance, like a book launch. So, all this to say, once you have a specific goal in mind, then you can also kind of reverse engineer it. Because it's like, let's say your goal is I want to sell 100 copies of my book, versus my goal is to sell a book. Well, that's like, those are two different things. So it's like, how do I sell a book is a little bit general, but it's like, okay, 100 copies. Now it's like a very tangible thing. I have a specific number. I can talk about strategies to achieve that. Another thing we talked about too is like, so for instance, if I want, for my book launch, maybe I want 20 people to come there. So how do I get 20 people to my event? So now we can reverse engineer that, because in some ways the numbers might look scary, but the numbers are actually very liberating because they're finite. So if I want 20 people to come to my event, one of the things we know that in general with events, then I need some signals of interest from people, not just people saying they're interested, but people saying they're coming. So if I want 20 people to really fill my event, one of the things I also need to understand is that a lot of people that say they're going to come aren't actually going to come. Like, it's just things are going to come up. There's going to be traffic. There's going to be after work. Things are going to happen with the family. We're going to be tired. Other better things may be occurring for people. So not everyone that says they want to come is actually going to come. So I need to kind of plan for that if I'm an organizer. So that's why it's really important. We talked about, for instance, the stages of events. So before you even do your event, kind of just gauging interest and getting people to signal to you that, oh yeah, I would want to be a part of this. And in general, what you can kind of see is that, taking the number of people who say they're interested and then, taking, 5, 10, 15% of that number and then using that to kind of determine how many seats you got. So, if I want 20 people to come to my thing, then ideally, I want like 80, 100, more than that, people saying that they want to come. Because then I can make some seats and be like, all right, 100 people say that they would be interested in coming. I'm going to plan my event for about 20 seats or something like that.
So that's like typically kind of what you run into, like maybe I would imagine that's like kind of like a first hurdle, you know what I mean? Like kind of being like, you don't want to just do something, you want to do a specific something. Like, is that like, like a
go something, yeah. So like, because again, you can reverse engineer it. So again, I want to hold an event, I want this many people at my event. So now I can work backwards and be like, okay, so if I want this many people, this is how many people I need to reach out to. This is then the next step, create the wait list. The next thing I need to do is, keep the wait list engaged and things like that. Then I need to actually release the tickets. Then I need to, maybe message a couple people. So like there's all these other steps that come in, but all that starts from being like, I want the event to have this many people.
Yeah.
And then I can reverse engineer it.
Yeah, I think and that's really cool because, if you're already in the process of working on a project, kind of a definitive goal at the end of that you actually have to work for, it feels much more, there's a higher level of fulfillment like throughout the course of the process. Even when you think about like working out, like if you're like, man, like, and then in the next 6 weeks, I just want to be healthier, or I just want to have worked out more. It's like, that's not super specific. But if you have specific gains that you're trying to make throughout the course of that time, then you can track both success and failure, right? Like, or maybe not failure, but like ways that you succeeded less so than you really wanted to. So shout out to those two people for kind of being able to kind of get the kind of resource to kind of get that kind of scope on their goal.
Which also leads to another thing that, from working with them that we talked about on the channel before, is that when it comes to success, I determine the metrics for success, not other things. Why am I going to set a goal that, one, I have no control over if I can achieve it or not, and then two, is going to make me upset if I can't achieve it? So like a lot of people, let's talk about like the event stuff. We can apply it to Diverses. So Diverses, we host events here. So this is the Stanza. This is space I rent out. There's like some factors kind of limiting what I can do with some events. Okay. First thing is, I don't feel like spending money. Okay. So I'm not doing ads. Okay. We're going purely organic. Okay. So that already is going to limit how many people I can reach. Okay. Second thing, we're located on the west side of town. There's not a lot of people. I mean, there are a lot of people out here, but the art scene on the west side is very different than the art scene that's downtown and on the north side and the east side. Most of the poets, at least that I know, like if I wanted to tap into my poet resources and like connect with people, Matthias is great because Matthias is willing to drive out here. A lot of other poets, though, not necessarily. They haven't been this far west for many of them. So that's a challenge. So I don't have a ton of poet resources out here on the west side. I don't know how many poets are necessarily out here on the west. There are some, but I think you also see a lot more like for instance like the spoken word community versus I think we're doing a little bit more academic page, so it's a different scene. So I don't have that connection. So it's like, all right, so I have this venue and I have these hurdles. So one thing I could do is I could hold events, plan and like hope that like 100 people show up, and then when they don't show up, you can get real upset about it and things like that. Or you can be like, let's change the nature of it. I can't necessarily control how many people turn out. But what I can do is I can change the metric for success. So I could be like, all right, well, I'm going to make the goal of our events not necessarily based on the attendance, but like let's put the value on the production quality. It's like with the recordings and the microphones, and let's put the value on the resource I give the people who perform. So it's like when you perform here, you get the recording of yourself, you get more of that online presence and things like that I can give you, for your work. So suddenly it becomes a lot more about the performer and less about the attendees. Because I could hold these events and be upset, like if the room is like half empty, or I can be like, no, like tonight was a massive success. Like we got the video we got, the talk we had, the conversations we've had, like for instance through the micro mic series, I think have been really helpful. And like the workshops we've done with the Poet Business Institute have been really helpful. So same event, same number of people, but completely different vibes and how we're feeling after the events are done.
I think funnily enough, I think in a lot of ways I'm kind of like following your lead in a lot of these spaces, because like as just a poet in a space, I could see you being like I could see a person being like, oh, only this many people came. Like I'm so frustrated with that kind of turnout, because if you are only thinking about yourself as the poet performer person, then you're not thinking about anything else that can come from this but people hearing you right now in real time. But as the producer in the space, like now you're like, well, hold on, like I just got a 30-minute recording of this performance. So not only do I have a 30-minute recording with good audio, like hopefully you're right. Good audio, good visual, maybe even sometimes you have like a 2, maybe even if you have a 3 cam setup, like
one day we're getting it. We got
right.
to.
No, I mean just to say like 2, 3 cam, like if you're able, like depending on like whatever metric, whatever thing you're able to do. A single camera is great. Like anything is great, but it's like as a producer, like the things that I'm thinking about is like, okay, like what do we have from this event? Because I'm like, hopefully people come, but I'm like, I would have tried to schedule this and try to do this without the people, because this being put online, this kind of being put out there, kind of being packaged, you can distribute it, that's going to give you a reach that's beyond, like the people that are here. Of course, it's always good to have like people live in the audience, but again, having that kind of reach where you're actually able to put your things out there, and like almost like a business card that you can be like, well, somebody's trying to figure out who is doing these kinds of poems. Like it's not just about who's sitting here in the audience, because maybe you don't even get that person. Maybe you just get people that really kind of like you. Maybe they people that really like you, but like if they're online, it's like maybe their timeline or their feed is going to be filled with things that they enjoy. And I in my experience, that person is going to be more instrumental to your overall success as an artist than people that are just like, oh, I really like you as a person, so I came to your show.
Yeah, and I mean it's like we've had performers come in here and the attendance was really low, but like they were like, oh man, I was expecting like 40, 50 people here, but then we put the recording online, and then like a week later they got like 100 people watching. And it's like there's more people that have seen you now than if we didn't record it and didn't have that.
Yeah.
Like so it's like we're doing like double what you had thought, but I think. And this is a tangent. I think a lot of people don't fully understand views online.
Yeah.
They forget that they're people, and they just view a view as a view and like a number, when it's like there's a person behind that number.
Yeah.
So it's like we forget that 100 views on a video is like imagine that you had 100 people there. And in fact it's even. In some ways, I think it's even more impressive to a degree, because these people, there's more competition. These people could have watched anything else, and they chose you and your thing,
Yeah.
And made time for it. But all that to say, just going back to the group I've been working with, so 2 poets, is that's one of the things we talked about, is we control the metric for success. Let's not put it on external things. I may not control audience. I may not control how many people actually buy my book. I may not control these other things, but there are things I do control. And for instance, if I'm trying to sell 100 copies of my book, there's the reality is that for anyone to sell 100 copies of their book, it's probably possible for anyone. You probably just don't want to put it into work, because for some people to sell one copy of the book, they're going to need to reach out to 100 people. And for some people to sell a copy of the book, they're going to need to reach out to 10,000 people.
Yeah.
But ultimately, for either of these situations, you have control over it. Because if you want to sell 100 copies of your book, you need to reach 10,000 people. Well, you better start calling. You better start reaching out to people, because it is a finite number. You might not like the number, but it is a finite number. So like you can start, kind of keeping track. You can track. Okay, did I reach out to 10 people today? Did I reach out to 20 people today? Did I do this and things like that? The last thing I'll say about, less from our group and more just from the versus like production side with our things, is I think a big consideration, and this is also side of the group too, like what we create, we want to be thinking about what it can give to people. So for instance, when people perform here, it's not just that they perform here, they also get a quality production of themselves, so seeing the poets that I've read here, post things about it online, post clips of their reading online, the poet headshots we do, like so many of the poets that have gotten headshots with me, what's their Instagram profile? What's the picture that they're using on all their flyers? There's this one person in particular I'm thinking about. Every single flyer of them, and I see a new flyer from them like every week. It's always that. It's the picture I took. Like every single time. To give people a resource that they're just using over and over and over again.
I just got a. But I mean, and I think I run, like one of the pages that I run is like solely photography, and so I'm always getting like tagged in, like like if somebody like uses like something, I'm always getting tagged in it. And there is like this show that's in Cleveland, and it's actually cool because like there's the show's in Cleveland, and the showrunner that is like doing the show, like apparently like whatever she got this submission, and then she was like looking at it. She was like, "This is such an amazing picture." She's kind of looking at it in the doc, and it was like one of my pictures. And they even reached out to me like, like I really like this like picture's really good. But this is like from a photo shoot that I did like 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Which is me and that person's done like other work since. But it's just to say like yeah, on the production side, and this is like something that it's really hard to impress upon people the importance of. But I think like maybe like a really clear thing is it's like the people that you are looking at as far as like the really large like people in your field, it's something that is so common for them they don't even think about it. It's like, of course this is a built-in part of their process. And you know what I mean? Like of course I get regular photo shoots. Of course I am like getting headshots. Of course I am recording my work in some kind of capacity, regardless of who comes or whatever. Like if 1,500 people came to your event, it would still be it would not even a loss. Like it would be a very much so missed opportunity if you got zero content from it.
No.
You know what I mean? As opposed to the other way, because like you can get so much other stuff on the back end of that. So just to say that, like, yeah, like as a producer, and again, there's a lot of ways that I'm like, I think like what Diverse is doing for poets is like, that's kind of it kind of should not be like this kind of novel experience for a lot of poets. A lot of times poets are like, oh, like I'm performing here, but if you're like, I don't see, the entire like place full, then I'm like, but like, do you understand like what you're getting after this is like your performance right now, and you can do like the amount of things that you can do with it, which is like crazy. Like I don't know, it's a kind of a
we're
value
very
offer.
biased, but yeah,
it's kind of a value offer that's like, again, I'm speaking as somebody who. Like I know of several people. I mean, my wife is actually one of the people that I'm always like, whatever you're doing, we should be like kind of doing some stuff for it. But like, like we're working on like productions right now, but like she's connected with a lot of poets that I'm like, they're brilliant, they're incredibly talented. I'm like, let's get it on record though.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I think one of the last things I'll mention too that you can kind of think about for yourselves as well is, so this is like a sprint in a way, right? Like it's 2 weeks meeting every day for like 30 minutes. You know, the people I'm working with, you know, like single parents, in college, also working a job or multiple jobs and things like that. So cutting out that 30-minute time every day is a serious commitment, but it's also like a short-term thing. So I think giving yourself an opportunity to work seriously on a project for a short, like dedicated, hard burst is really like it kicks up so much momentum, because you know, if we weren't working on these manuscripts right now, things would be moving so slowly. You know, it's just, you know, you work on it when you have time, and the reality is, like, here's the thing, like, when we do a session like this, or a group like this, is that I'm asking for 30 minutes out of their day, every day for 2 weeks. You don't just add 30 minutes. That 30 minutes is a subtraction, because you're not doing something else. Like, before we started this, you already had that time filled. You were already doing something with that 30 minutes. And now I'm asking you to not do that thing. So it's not like you just added 30 minutes to your day.
Yeah.
You're purposely, intentionally taking something out of your schedule and jolting it.
Yeah.
You know? And yeah, maybe that would be really hard to do for like a year, you know, or 5 years or 10 years. But 2 weeks, like I could do that for 2 weeks. I mean, I think you see that same kind of idea with like, you know, national like poetry writing month and things like that. People doing like their 30s for 30s and things like that. It's the idea that, okay, I'm just going to do something sustained and intense for a brief period of time. And I think that's another just advantage of this group, is it kicks you into gear and keeps you moving.
Yeah.
Whereas before, maybe you would have stalled or delayed or procrastinated on. It's like, no, now there's urgency. Like, you got a little bit of homework to do every day, and you're not doing it alone. Like, that sense of accountability, not just to your leader, like me in the case of this group, but also to your partner. Again, there's 3 of us, you know, so like there's people checking in on you, being like, hey, did you do your thing? Like, hey, we're in this call together, you know. It's like it's like, you know, it's running alone versus running with a partner, or like starting a new program alone versus starting with a partner. Like, just having that group around you, I think is really beneficial.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Any other things that come to mind?
Not in particular. I think we kind of cover everything. I mean, just kind of information, at least from me on my end.
Yeah.
I think that there is like on the direction of, you know, creating something in one specific direction, or kind of having some focus when you're creating something. It kind of works when you're just creating the one poem itself. You know what I mean? If you're sitting down to try to write that one poem, I think it's going to help if you know, sitting down, kind of who you are and what you're doing right now to create that poem. And then also, just on the production side and kind of putting things out into the world and things like that. Like, if you also, it also helps on the production side, right? If you know the kind of poet that you are, you know the kind of work that you're going to want to produce, then you also kind of know, it helps you shoot with shooting styles, right? Yeah. It can help you shoot with like if you can help you understand, like, if there's a lot of kind of the darker, almost like kind of goth, emo as kind of like poetry types, and I'm like, okay, you probably don't want like a super bright, you know, cheery, happy kind of audio file behind like what you're doing. Right. Like there's like some things that can help you there. So yeah, any way that you can really as closely define who you are or what your work is, it's going to help both in creating, but it's also going to help in like production and where you're performing, how you're performing, things like that. So yeah.
So I encourage you, you know, find some people to do a little sprint with, kind of like this, you know, or create your own. I think it can also help position you as the person doing it as an authority and a resource that people turn to. You know, you view it differently when you're a member versus you're the organizer. And people view you a little differently too.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you guys have questions about kind of starting your own little group like that, or we talked earlier about a challenge group, you like that idea and you want to do it, let us know some things that you organize or think about organizing in the comments or in the chat. Otherwise, hey, we got more events coming up this week. On Thursday with the Poet Business Institute, we're going to be working on a performance workshop. So if you're trying to get better at performing a poem from the microphone, we're going to give you some strategies to do that. And then free headshots on Friday. And then lastly, we'll be doing more Arts and Offers talk next Tuesday right around this time, 11:30 a.m. New York. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Once more, my name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
Thank you, Matthias, for being with us. Thank you guys for being with us. We'll catch you later. You guys have a good day, have a good night, and of course, have a good afternoon. We'll see you guys.